Yeah, there's one thing I wanted to say. You said right at the beginning, you go Benjamin, right?
Yeah, Ben.
Or Ben. Okay, right at the beginning, you talked about how there are some super minds in the future that are helping us move toward them. That's how I process what you said, and that reminded me of a little trick that you use sometimes in analysis or best practice. If you're analyzing a process that you don't know where it began, you don't know when it began, and you don't know when it's going to end, then kind of the safe bet is to think that we're somewhere in the middle. You know, it's just like playing the odds. We're somewhere in the middle of this timeline. And I just wonder, just as you were talking, you know, reflecting on all the progress that has been made in cognition in my adult lifetime, which is admittedly, if you could imagine all the progress that could be made, very little, but nevertheless, from my little
it's amazing, and it's
seems really big.
It's unsung, right? I mean,
yeah. So where are we? I'm just curious,
has
where are we
progressed
in that timeline? What would you say? That's my question.
I mean, I think, to me, where you are in a timeline is very perspectival, and it depends on, it's very observer dependent. And I mean, certainly history looks one way in hindsight and looks another way when you're living through it. And it looks different ways in hindsight as history progresses, right? So I think I would say the perspective from which you're in the middle of some timeline gives some insights. Perspectives where you're beginning or the end gives different insights, and each of those perspectives is interesting to take about advance of technology and cognition. Certainly, like I edited a book together with my dad called the End of the Beginning, right, which was from a quote from Winston Churchill. So I mean, we're at the end of the legacy human phase of history, perhaps, if we're about to create super AIs. On the other hand, we're at the beginning of a phase of much more flexible forms of mind being manifested in this corner of the universe. But yet, from the point of view of the work we're doing every day, we're right in the middle, right? I mean that. On the other hand, it may always seem that way to people. Like you always feel like you're kind of stuck in the middle of something, which is probably true, depending on the magnification that you choose. I would say, in terms of science, I feel like for AI or AGI, these interval thinking machines, we're near the beginning, but we're not like 1% of the way, right? We're 20% of the way or something. Like we have AIs like ChatGPT and Midjourney that do amazing stuff that feels to a lot of people like it's generally intelligent, even though as a scientist, I feel like it isn't. But we have what I think are credible cognitive architectures for building AGI systems, and we at least can build them and explore them now. In terms of understanding psi phenomena, I feel like we're more at the 3 or 5% level of
maybe like 1. Yeah.
Like we don't have credible paradigms to explore and then potentially accept or refute, right? Whereas in AGI, we have at least paradigms that seem credible. We can build stuff and see how it works and learn. In understanding the paranormal, we're not yet in the middle. We're barely out of the starting gate and maybe tripping over our own feet as we leave.
Yeah, Ben, do you think
that's very useful? Gate, right? Yeah.
Do you think that's because, I mean, sort of my intuition is this, but maybe you disagree, but I'm curious what you think. Do you think that that's because for AGI, for AI, for ASI, superintelligence, we can do all that within, we think we can do all that within the materialist paradigm, but with the whole reason that paranormal stuff is called paranormal is because it seems to buck the materialist paradigm, and we don't quite know how to deal with that.
Paradigms, I mean, you had that's probably true. I think that a lot of the more interesting aspects of AGI and superintelligence are orthogonal to the question of materialist or non-materialist paradigm.
You don't
So
have to
it's
answer
not-
those questions to
So
pursue
yeah,
it,
so it's
right?
just not, it's not constrained as much by that. But I would say, I mean, you needed a paradigm shift to be able to do AGI, and it's just happened. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
you had a behaviorist paradigm in psychology for a period of time, and within a behaviorist paradigm, you couldn't make progress on toward AGI. But then you had a shift to a sort of cognitivist paradigm, which now we take for granted because that shift happened, but it was a big deal at the time, right? And I mean, in terms of machine consciousness, you had a paradigm shift also. Like when I started my career, you couldn't talk about machines being conscious or you'd be kicked out of the university department, right? And so there was a paradigm shift in consciousness studies to now you can talk about machines being conscious. There's a paradigm shift away from behaviorism toward cognitivism, where you can talk about internal state structures and dynamics and representations, not just behaviors. So you did need what at the time seemed like huge paradigm shifts. Like there were shifts in what you could publish in a journal and get accepted. There were shifts in what you could talk about in the department seminar and still get tenure, right? So there were pretty decent sized paradigm shifts needed to get to where we are now in terms of AGI R&D.